Welcome back. I'm going to try to solve some more chess puzzles. I kind of hope I crack 2300 today, but that may or may not happen because, as we know, these puzzles are getting pretty tough. Let's see how it works. All right, I'm going to click on puzzles. There it is, 2282. Okay, I have no idea how my queen got trapped down in there. And also, I think this is going to be one of those puzzles where every move has to be check because of what's going on down here with my king. If I make a move that's not check, my opponent is going to check me here, and if I recapture, they're going to come down here, and that's going to be checkmate because the knight also guards that square. So if I can't get rid of one of these rooks or that knight beforehand, then I'm going to get checkmated unless I keep checking and checkmate myself. I don't think I would want to follow with the queen because the opponent can block with their queen guarded by the pawn. So I think we want to go with the rook check on d1. And the queen is still going to be cutting off these squares from the king as well as this one from back there in the corner and cutting off basically across here, while my rook down here on d1 is cutting off these squares. So that will leave the king only two options at that point. And if it goes to e6, then I can bring my queen out of the corner and check it again here. But if it goes to e7, wait, I just saw something. Okay, first comes here, what if I made my second check this one? Okay, because then my queen will be cutting off these squares, my rook will be cutting off these, my queen cuts off this one. So that will leave the king only these two options, either one of which can be met with my queen coming back here. And I think that'll be mate. So I'm going to try queen to a8. Okay. Okay, because here my queen will be protected by this pawn on d5, and my queen will be protecting the rook. So just to summarize, my pawn protects or guards these two squares. My queen will be cutting off this and this and this, and my rook is going to cut off those, and none of the enemy pieces can attack me there. So I believe that's checkmate. Wow. Okay, well that took 6 minutes. But it was a 2256 rated puzzle. Okay, next puzzle. Okay, now I discovered not too long ago that one of the things that I like about endgame puzzles, despite me not still understanding all these endgames, is the simplicity because of the small number of pieces. So I do not have a passed pawn. My opponent does have a passed pawn. Okay. But the simplicity is that there are only 4 things to consider, and we can immediately discount our g-pawn because it cannot move at all. Our h-pawn can move, but I think that would be a mistake because it's just easily captured either by the bishop, but the bishop might stay here to guard this pawn. The pawn could just capture. So I think if we move our h-pawn and that pawn captures, then we have a passer, so maybe that's not bad. And that passed. But you know what? I just saw this too. If we move the h-pawn, then the king can capture here. And even if we take, oh no, if we could take that, and that would be the protected passed pawn. Okay, so if we move this and the bishop takes, then we have nothing guarding our g-pawn, but they'll have nothing guarding their c-pawn, which we could then capture with either of our pieces. For that matter, we could capture here, sacrificing that for the pawn, and then take this, and it would be a draw. So I'm going to keep this in mind just in case. There might be things that work there. Okay, well, our king cannot move here because that's check. Their pawn is coming this way, so that square is guarded. We cannot, well, also the bishop guards these two squares, so we cannot capture the pawn or move our king here. We can move our king here, but I don't know that we'd want to. They could follow with a check. We can move our king here, but again, I don't know that we would want to. We might want to blockade that pawn. We don't want to go behind it. That doesn't accomplish anything. That just hangs a knight. In fact, any of these moves here, the opponent wins our knight immediately. And again, we can't go here or here. And going there, so that's the only choice of a move for the king, is king to e3. And I know this sounds like a long process, but it's my process of elimination. And we can't do this in middle games or openings because there are so many pieces on the board. But here we can eliminate every piece's moves. Okay, so we can move the king there, but it doesn't seem to accomplish anything. And we can move this here, but again, as we've said, it just hangs the pawn, creates a passed pawn for them. And I think if we move this forward, their bishop can go here guarded by its pawn. They'll guard each other, and that bishop will be protecting the promotion square of that pawn. You know, keeping us from continuing to move forward. So there, and they would still have their passed pawn over here. So yeah, even though we've created our own passed pawn, they can move theirs forward. If we move ours forward, they can take. So the only other piece left is the knight. We can check the king here on d6, or we could take that pawn and check. And so I'm gonna guess that's the best move. But we have to look at the response. What is black going to do? I mean, what is white going to do if we capture the pawn on g3? Because that would in effect give us two passed pawns, and they would be in check at that time. They would have to move out of check. My guess is they would move here, from which spot they could capture our h pawn. If they moved here, oh, I was going to say we could also just take the bishop now. It's got to be a knight move. It's either taking the bishop or the pawn. But again, if we take the pawn, where's the king going to go? Because that's check. The king has to go somewhere. I don't think it would come forward, because that opens it up to another check. And then the king is further from this pawn. So yeah, I think if we check here, their king moves to g5, aiming for our h pawn. And at that point, we could bring our knight back, checking again. And if they take our h pawn, we could get their bishop with check, and it will also be guarding our g pawn, which is now passed. So that's what I'm going to do. Oh, all that thinking, and that wasn't oh my goodness. Come on. Was it what was it? Was it the first thing that I said? No? Was it taking the bishop? It was taking the bishop. And now this, right? Because we already discussed, if we take this pawn, they get to our pawns too quick. But if we go here, if they capture, we have a passer. If they don't capture, then we have the passer here. Ah, darn it. I don't know what was wrong with the plan that we had. I'm going to check it real quick because that's what they did first. Now, what was so wrong with this? I mean, it says that's drawn now, and it's because the king goes to g6 to g5. No, it says the king goes to g6 or f4. I'm not sure about that. Let's say it goes to f4. Didn't we already discuss that we would give another check here? And that's what it says our best move is. Now it says they would drop back, but would they? Yeah, see, their best move is to drop back, and we have a slight advantage because now this, what are they going to do? Bishop to e5. We move our pawn forward again. It says they would go there. I honestly thought it would go here, but we can take it there. So their best move is here. Now we can take this pawn. And then what? Then they take this one, I assume? Yeah. And I can't ever promote that. I mean, I can get close to it, but then they could check me. Let's see what happens there. Yeah, they would check me. It's their only move that maintains the draw. Then I can just step back here. Or one of these places. But why wouldn't I just do this to protect the advance? Because they're just going to go here again, and I can't dislodge that bishop, can I? Or can I? Are they saying I honestly can't dislodge that bishop? It says I would play knight to b5. Why? In order to come back here? No. Because where I would want my... Oh, that's where I would want my knight. And my king is there. I would also want my knight here, but it's never going to make it. Okay. So that one ends up in a draw. And I'm 7 points below where I started, so I better start getting some of these right. I do have a check in this position. I think I could win the queen with that. Because, well, only if the king recaptured. If the king recaptured, I would have this, which discovers a check from my queen to the king. And then even if the queen blocked, I could take it with the pawn or the bishop. And if the queen didn't block, remember, check, king recaptures here. If the queen didn't block and the king just moved out of check, then I would have that. But the king doesn't have to capture the bishop in the first place, right? The king could go there, and if it did, I would still have this and maybe win the queen. But the king could also go here. There is this, rook to d1, directly attacking the queen. Can the queen get away? Yes, the queen can go here. Or there, for that matter. So I don't know that just attack it, one move attack on the queen is the answer. But what happens if I capture this pawn with check and the king moves aside? I'm back to that because I don't see anything else. If the king goes to f8, do I have anything? No, I don't. So there has to be something better. I need to get this bishop out of the way. Okay, I just saw this. Maybe my brain's working slow, but these two pieces are lined up on the f7 pawn. And if my dark squared bishop was somewhere else, anywhere else, and it was my turn, I would have checkmate on f7. So is there a place I can move this bishop that causes any sort of problem, like here, for example? So they would have to defend against mate some way, somehow. And they might do it by castling, I don't know, but then I would win their bishop. I'm going to try that just because nothing else works. Like for a second I thought this might work, but once the king moves to f8, I don't have anything immediate. But here I'm definitely threatening checkmate on f7 if my dark squared bishop moves. I don't know where it should move to. I don't think it should move to g5, for example. because I'm not threatening mate once they do this. Because even though that is technically a mate threat, just playing f6, not only, I mean, it hits the bishop and it's protected by the queen and it stops the mate threat. But coming back this way, if they then do something to stop the mate threat, I get the bishop. If they stop the mate threat, I play here, bishop to e3 first, and they stop the mate threat this way, well, then I take that bishop, because if they come back to take it, I still have mate. So I'm going to play that. And that was wrong. It's going to be one of those days. Why didn't it just go there? After this, why in the world didn't the king go there? It says taking is its best move. But seriously, what's the downside of that? So now I play bishop to g3. Oh, that's this one. Okay. And now I'm guarding that bishop. But they're going to play bishop to g4. What? Why would they do that? Oh, to distract my queen so they could win this bishop? But wouldn't I just move forward? Oh, it says I would take it. And then they would take that. Okay, the reason that the puzzle didn't do here is because all three of these moves are equal. Whereas the other way, the king taking the bishop, there's only one good move. Next. Well, I've lost my confidence over the last two puzzles. Here I do not see that move. I just don't. Like, what is there? Putting my queen here. What does that do? Nothing. But my rook has to stay here to guard this pawn. That pawn has to stay there to guard this pawn. This pawn, if it moves, undoubles theirs. This pawn, I mean, I could move that pawn. In fact, that's probably what I would play in a game, is move my c pawn up one to blockade these two. This queen doesn't necessarily need to guard the f pawn because the king is guarding the f pawn. But, I mean, this one looks like it might be about to come forward. And if I take it, no, my queen would be guarding that. So, like, yeah, in a game, I'm just going to play this. And I knew that would be wrong. All right. What is it? It is putting the queen over here. That's exactly what we knew would happen, because that's the only safe spot for the rook, and I haven't gained anything. But there's another good move. There's another good move somewhere. Is it this? Forcing the rook to move back and then we win that pawn? No, of course it's not. What is it? It's the king now. This puzzle is still going. If I take the rook, they can check me here and then I just go back. Okay, the idea of this puzzle is to force the rook to the only square where it can't be captured, but then it can be threatened by the king. And then you win the rook. Wow. This is not a good video, y'all. I mean, I have a check, but the king just gets out of it a whole bunch of different ways. I have a check here, and the king just gets out of it in a whole bunch of different ways. yes, this is good. Right? If I go these squares, after I check here, and then okay, but then I'm going to check again with bishop. But then it's good if I go these squares. Okay, so let's check here on e2. And another square. Then okay, I will these close after my rook. Like, then everything. Then I'm going to get the other pawn. Then I'm going to get it there. And anything. I think. I check here first. Anything went there. Then I follow up there. We're just I check here. Anything there. Just follow up there. The king probably goes to one of these squares. Maybe my first move should be to take there. Oh my. That's probably it, isn't it? That's probably it. And now I can win the bishop with jack? Maybe? Check? No, because the queen's guarding the bishop. I mean, I could promote, and then the bishop takes, and then I win the bishop for a pawn. But then the queen takes this pawn. But then I have a check. Maybe I should check first. And then should I take this pawn? Because right now if I do anything else, they're going to win my rook. Like if I do this and they capture and I capture, then they're going to take this rook. If I take the bishop, oh, maybe I should take the bishop because when they take back, then I can promote. When they capture, I'll get it. I actually got 5 points for that. And I'm 31 points lower than where I started this video. 2 out of 5. Okay. We'll see you next time.